Ben Sulayem has come under intense fire lately, particularly from Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, over the proposed adjustments to Appendix B that the FIA president recently hinted at. The general sentiment among the drivers suggests a deep skepticism. Few believe these changes will ever be implemented, and most view his remarks as empty rhetoric lacking any real follow-through. This growing sense of distrust is only ramping up the pressure on Ben Sulayem, who's already fighting to retain his grip on leadership. But the real question remains: will the sharp criticism from Hamilton and Russell actually reinforce the drivers' collective stance against him? And more broadly, how does this public tension impact Ben Sulayem's standing within the FIA's internal hierarchy? What's clear is that the drivers are no longer hiding their disdain. In the most recent press briefing, they made it unmistakably obvious that their patience is gone, particularly when it comes to the ambiguous and potentially controversial revisions to Appendix B. Sulayem has also drawn backlash for his attempts to meddle with so-called speech regulations, especially after trying to restrict drivers' freedom of expression. This move sparked outrage in the paddock, with drivers insisting, loudly and unanimously, that such behavior is unfit for someone leading the FIA. Now, Sulayem finds himself engulfed in controversy at the worst possible time, right when he's expected to defend his presidency at the end of the year in front of the governing board. Attempting to contain the fallout, Sulayem tried to soften the blow in a recent statement. After listening to constructive feedback from drivers across our 7 FIA World Championships, I'm open to refining Appendix B. As a former rally driver, I understand better than most the demands placed on competitors. Appendix B is a crucial part of the International Sporting Code and is key to ensuring the sport remains accessible to our entire motorsport community. Rules are made by people, and people can improve them. That principle of constant improvement has always been central to the FIA's mission. But not everyone is buying it. Several former FIA officials have openly rejected Sulayem's leadership, citing his autocratic tendencies as the primary reason for their exit. Among those who've walked away are Robert Reid, previously the FIA vice president, and David Richards, who led Motorsport UK. Both claim they were blocked from attending a meeting where a mandatory two-stop rule for Monaco was approved, one they never agreed to, and allegedly were coerced into staying silent about via a non-disclosure clause they insist they never signed. This incident raises serious questions about the FIA's transparency and internal governance. It's no wonder, then, that Hamilton and Russell have started openly challenging the credibility of the institution itself. For Hamilton, arguably Sulayem's fiercest critic, this is only the latest chapter in an ongoing feud. Reflecting on the matter, the 7-time world champion remarked, "At the end of the day, we don't have a meaningful seat at the decision-making table, and that's something that really needs to change. You've got people making decisions for others when they've never walked in our shoes. What we're offering is a perspective, an honest, real one, from inside the cockpit." These remarks come on the heels of a previous spat between Hamilton and Sulayem over the FIA's controversial attempt to ban jewelry, a move that many saw as petty, out of touch, and authoritarian. The tension is mounting, and with each passing week, the gap between the FIA leadership and its top drivers grows more impossible to ignore. Back in 2022, when the FIA first floated its controversial jewelry ban, Lewis Hamilton, never one to shy away from defiance, showed up to the Miami Grand Prix decked out in every piece of jewelry he could possibly wear. It was a clear and calculated jab at the governing body's new policy. And during that same weekend, he was spotted strolling beside Ben Sulayem and race director Eduardo Freitas in Jeddah, with the FIA president seemingly attempting to initiate a conversation. Hamilton's cold shoulder spoke volumes. His opinion hasn't softened one bit. His stance remains firm. He has zero respect for Sulayem's leadership, and that's not likely to change any time soon. It was, and still is, a bold statement from a 7-time world champion. We're currently witnessing a troubling era in Formula One, one where the athletes themselves seem to have little to no voice in the very sport they power. Yes, the drivers do have the GPDA, Grand Prix Drivers Association, which is led by former racer Alex Wurz and currently chaired by George Russell. But when it comes to high-level decisions made by the FIA, Their role is largely symbolic. They can share suggestions publicly, but those recommendations rarely translate into real influence. That growing frustration has been a recurring theme in Russell's recent statements. The Mercedes driver has been vocal in his belief that the GPDA deserves a seat at the table, an actual say in the FIA's decision-making process, not just token input from the sidelines. Russell's skepticism has only deepened with the discussion around Appendix B. According to him, the idea of reform has been floating around for ages, yet nothing tangible has ever materialized. "We don't want to just hear that these changes are being considered," Russell said bluntly. "Everyone considers things. What we want is action. We want implementation." His message was clear: talk is cheap, and unless these words translate into visible changes on the track, they hold no value. This is the heart of the issue for drivers navigating today's FIA. There's a complete disconnect between those making the rules and those risking their necks on the circuit. Drivers are being policed down to their language, prohibited from swearing, and forbidden from publicly criticizing stewards' rulings. Even unintentionally offending an official could lead to disciplinary action. It's a fragile, oppressive environment. In contrast, if you look at other major sports like football or basketball, there's room for open, constructive dialogue. Governing bodies in those sports don't shy away from players' feedback. In fact, they welcome it as part of the growth and development of their institutions. Formula One, however, is stuck in a rigid, top-down structure, and the absence of driver representation in FIA decision-making is glaring. Russell has repeatedly shined a light on this gap, insisting that meaningful change won't happen unless the drivers are given real influence. Speaking on the broader issue of governance, he noted, "Honestly, any time we hear something from that side of the sport, the FIA, it rarely comes as a shock anymore." That resignation is telling. The drivers are used to being ignored. And that, perhaps, is the most damaging part of all. It's undeniably disheartening to witness someone so deeply rooted in the sport, someone widely respected for years, fall into such a contentious position. As the situation unfolds, the question remains, what's next? There's no denying the disappointment surrounding the current state of affairs. Hopefully, a sense of stability returns sooner rather than later. Despite the chaos, all the drivers have expressed their unwavering trust in Stefano Domenicali and Formula One's leadership. They're confident in the ongoing collaboration between Domenicali, the teams, and the broader structure of the sport. Everyone involved understands that working together is the only way forward. Stability and cooperation are in the best interest of all parties. No one wants conflict. What the drivers are calling for is simple: unity, not division. But the backlash hasn't only come from within the paddock. Former race director Tim Mayer has also joined the chorus of criticism. Like Robert Reid and David Richards before him, Mayer stepped down because he felt the FIA was heading in the wrong direction. He wasn't shy about pointing fingers. His frustrations were aimed squarely at Mohammed Ben Sulayem. There's a growing perception that the Emirati ex-driver is treating the FIA like his personal political machine, running it with an iron fist. Those who dare to oppose his directives, it said, often face subtle or outright pressure from the top. Digging deeper, there's an ongoing controversy surrounding Ben Sulayem's push to penalize drivers for using profanity. That's his stance, and everything that's transpired since suggests it's been enforced with zeal. While Ben Sulayem doesn't directly intervene in stewarding decisions, insiders claim he's used his staff to push his agenda behind the scenes. Technically, offensive language is prohibited under FIA regulations, so punishments aren't outside the rulebook. But that raises a different debate entirely. Is it really worth targeting drivers over something as subjective as bad language? This entire ordeal has sent a troubling message. Not everyone inside the FIA agreed with Ben Sulayem's crackdown on foul language. In fact, many believe these penalties made the stewards and FIA staff more vulnerable and disliked by the drivers, for no legitimate reason and with no direct fault of their own. That's why reform isn't just appropriate, it's long overdue. And according to many within the motorsport community, change is already on the horizon. One of the most frequently mentioned names in speculation about future leadership is Susie Wolff. Thanks to her extensive experience in motorsport and her vocal advocacy for women and minorities in a male-dominated environment, many consider her a viable candidate to replace Ben Sulayem. She'd have every reason to step up, especially after the FIA, under Sulayem's leadership, launched a baseless investigation into her and her husband Toto Wolff, only to drop it shortly after with no evidence ever presented. The episode highlighted incompetence and deep dysfunction at the top of the organization. Still, Susie Wolff has publicly denied having any ambition to run for the FIA presidency, at least for now. So the big question remains: what lies ahead for the FIA if they choose to move on from the divisive reign of Ben Sulayem? Will pressure from influential figures like Russell and Hamilton be the tipping point that forces change at the top? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And once you do, make sure to click on the next video appearing on your screen right now.